Okay.
Hi, everybody. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Pawtential. Really excited today to have a vet with us, but not just a vet, a holistic vet. And some of you have probably seen him at events or met him before or know of him. And his name is Vince the Vet. And he is, well, that's his brand name. And to be honest, because we all know him by that name, it just goes to show how good his branding is. Because actually, I had to think for a minute what his surname was. So, if you're going to learn about branding and how to build a natural health business, then this guy really has done this to the point where everyone's kind of forgotten he even has a surname. His name is basically Vince the Vet, and his name is really Vince McNally. And Vince started off, he'll tell you in a minute his story, I hope, but he started off in traditional veterinary practice and then shifted over to holistics, and now has the most fantastically branded business. I really like it. I don't know, Vince, whether you still have that rap where people used to phone up Vince's about being like a proper, what would you like a hip hop rap? It was quite funny. Anyway, so Vince, tell us about your journey, really sort of from traditional practice and moving over to more holistic ways of looking at things.
Well, I mean, the whole story began when I was about 5 or 6. I mean, it sounds really corny. We had a cat called a little tortoiseshell and white cat, and my mum and dad had a newsagent shop, and there was a bottle of disinfectant on the shelf, and she was jumping up and running around and knocked this bottle off, and it crashed to the floor, and Tina fell off the shelf and landed in the disinfectant. Before we could grab her, she was out the door covered in this horrible black stuff. We went out looking for her, but couldn't find her. And she went missing for about 2 weeks, no matter kind of where we went, shouting high and low, trying to get her. And then she came back. At that stage, she'd cleaned herself from head to tail, completely spotless, but swallowed all the disinfectant in the process. And the disinfectant had destroyed her kidneys. She was dying. Mum and Dad took her to the vets and brought her back, saying the vet said nothing could be done. So really, we kind of nursed her, passed away, and it didn't take very long, but I was absolutely kind of devastated by this. I can still picture Tina. That's my earliest memory, even to this day. Yeah. Tina lying on the carpet in front of the fire, kind of breathless and breathing, and less and less kind of pronounced. And I even had a little mirror from a lucky bag, and I was holding that in front of her nose to see whether she was still alive. So she passed away, and I broke my heart. That was the kind of seed for becoming a vet. Firstly, because I was always close to animals. I was much closer to animals than people growing. And the second thing was I felt so helpless by the fact that I couldn't do anything to help my best friend, my furry feline friend. So that planted the seed, and then from then everything was geared towards becoming a vet. So to cut a long story short, I qualified as a vet at Liverpool University in 1983, I think. For the first 10 years, did you want to ask something at that point, Caroline?
No, I'm listening.
For the first kind of 10 years, I practiced as a conventional vet. For the first 3 years, I specialised in orthopaedic surgery. I had great experience working for the PDSA, which was just phenomenal because unlike most of my kind of peers at the time, I was able to treat pets according to what they needed most, rather than have any financial constraints or constraints in terms of what the practice policy was, which, as an aside, I suppose, it's a very difficult situation for most graduates these days, having to fit in with what practices require them to do. And I didn't have any of that. It was pure clinical freedom, which was just it was a dream come true for a young vet. And so I was there for the 3 years, and I set up my own practice after I'd been qualified for 3 years. That's partly, which is relevant to the conversation we're going, because my parents were self-employed, so I grew up. They had their own businesses, and I worked in the businesses. I was delivering newspapers for a child and collecting money on a Sunday for who owed money and all those things. So it was very kind of everything was self-motivated. When you're self-employed, you have to be self-motivated. You have to be self-motivated because if you don't do it, nobody's going to do it for you. So you've got to be creative. You've got to be inspired to do what you do. And I was lucky to have that as an upbringing. It taught me a great work ethic, and it laid the foundation for taking that step after only 3 years of graduating to buying my own practice. For the first 10 years, I kind of went down the conventional route, the orthopedics, the drugs, the surgery, etc., etc. The aspiration there was always to offer the very best veterinary care possible. So I had us for knowledge, for training, for learning new skills, for doing surgery that was kind of cutting edge, all that kind of thing. But I became increasingly frustrated towards the end of that 10-year period that there were so many pets that can't be helped by the conventional approach to treating pets, and you're largely falling back on drugs, antibiotics, a few others, surgery of one kind of another. And then there was this huge category that just couldn't be helped. I found that incredibly kind of dissatisfying and frustrating. And years and years, I've left a few little elements out. One of the big pluses of growing up in the news agency is you see all sorts. And there was a kind of a little almanac. It's still available these days, called Old Moore's Almanac, and it's a delightful little kind of paperback thing. And it's got Planting by the Stars. It's got all sorts of strange ads in about lifting of curses, and then there's esoteric kind of companies, Thorson's, and this kind of. And I loved it when I was growing up. This kind of mysterious adverts, and. So I started to read some of the books. I sent off with my pocket money to get some of the books on ancient Ayurveda and Hindu philosophy and all this kind of thing. And one of the first books I read was called Water Cure by Ramacharaka Yogi, and it was all about how cleansing the body, was so important. So that kind of interest to alternative ways of looking at the body and health was kind of planted at that age when I was kind of 8, 9, and 10. And that kind of came back to me towards the end of this 10-year period. I thought the body is capable of so much more than we give it credit for if given the right support. And yet here I am kind of struggling to help these animals with all these problems. And that kind of sparked a resurgence of that inquiry into what's possible, and how could that innate ability of the body to heal be tapped into? Because as you know, it's extraordinary, but it's like finding the right key for the right pet or for the right person. One key might not work for one person. If you find the right key for that particular, you can unlock those healing powers. So that kind of started me off on the kind of next stage of my journey.
Yeah. I love that. I didn't know about this almanac. I hadn't realized that you'd had that experience at a young age. And I find it fascinating because so many of us have rekindled something that we felt in childhood and made that into our entrepreneurial journey, or made that into our income stream, whether it is just something as obvious as painting or creating, that we obviously did more of as a child, or most of us did, or in your case, you were really fascinated by this as a child, and that's almost sparked something in you, which has then come out in your entrepreneurial journey much later on.
Those seeds, they're so important because when you're young, your mind is open, and the world's a magical place, isn't it? As we grow older, there's a tendency for that to become a bit jaded and for the mind to become more tramlined and blinkered. But at that age, you're kind of looking to explore all sorts. And I was always kind of, that way inclined anyway. I didn't lose it entirely because when I was seeing practice as a veterinary student, I always sought out the veterinary surgeons that were doing things differently. So I saw practice with a gentleman called Norman Chandler up in Hexham, who used to look after Michael Dickinson's racehorses. And he was kind of pioneering new techniques for tendon healing, and he was injecting kind of hyaluronase into horses' legs to dissolve the connective tissue between the tendon sheaths, so new blood vessels could come in, and he was doing this kind of totally off his own, and I just loved that. And there was another guy called John Nichol, but both of them are dead now, unfortunately. But John Nichol was one of the first vets to introduce acupuncture into the UK, and he had a practice in Guildford. So I made sure I saw practice there and saw and talked to the clients, and these were kind of down-to-earth, ordinary people coming in. Since my cat started to have this acupuncture, all the scratching stopped and this, that, and the other. And so that kind of inquiry, that inquisitiveness, into kind of alternatives was always, because when you're going through veterinary college, you've got 5 years, you've got so much cramming, you come out, you've got the basics, but you don't really know a lot because it's all kind of theoretical largely. You've got some practical experience, so it takes quite some time to kind of put that into practice. So there wasn't really room for anything else, and there wasn't a need up until that point, until I became frustrated and thought, gosh, I'm doing this. I'm a vet because I want to help as many animals as possible, and yet I'm only helping a proportion. There surely must be something else that can help these pets. And then synchronicity. I was kind of kicking my heels at a British Small Animal Veterinary Association Congress in Harrogate, going back 25 ago, and I had half an hour to spare, and I happened to look at the poster, and there was a guy, a Dr. David Miley Taylor from the Glasgow Home Hospital, was going to give a 30-minute talk. He was flying down from Glasgow just to give this talk, and I thought, what have you got to lose? Went along, and it just sparked something. I'd come across homeopathy before, and I thought it was a load of bunkum. I've got to be honest, I thought it was completely preposterous. I knew somebody who used it, and it didn't seem to get anywhere with it, and I thought, no, I can't. But he started to talk about snowflakes and incredible kind of patterns in nature, and that every snowflake is kind of slightly different, and yet it's all water, and yet he was laying the kind of foundation for patterns of information within a substance rather than the substance itself. Kind of just caught my imagination, because I could look at that and think, I can see how information can be carried by something, even though chemically it's the same, how different information can be carried by the one medium, and I always use the analogy like a footprint in the sand. If you were to scoop that sand up, it's just sand. If you have it analysed, it'll be silica. And yet the footprint left by the person walking on the sand is different, depending on their weight, the height, the way they move, etc. So you can get a lot of information from that footprint about, what has passed over that particular spot. And so that really caught my imagination, and so I started to look into kind of various alternatives, and that sparked that particular journey. So I went to the hospital in Glasgow and London and Oxford, but at the same time, a personal journey began where I started to look at kind of ancient systems of healing. So I kind of learned and had Vedic medicine and external off-the-body qigong, for example, and traditional Chinese medicine and flower essences, where I was often the only person in a room full of 100 ladies on the course, which was always quite amusing. So I kind of wanted, I had the same thirst at that point for learning about alternatives and new ways of looking at helping these pets that I had when I first wanted to become a vet, and the answers all beckoned in the surgical and pharmaceutical kind of arena, so that kind of, that's where all that came from.
I mean, one thing that strikes me about it all is the amount of enthusiasm and motivation that you have for it. And I think maybe you could just share, like, is this just you, or is this like, have you got stuff that you do that kind of keeps you motivated and enthusiastic?
Two things motivate me. Mum used to say, you want to know the ins and outs of a duck's behind, and it's true. I like exploring. I like things that are secret, that are hidden, that are beyond understanding. I see that as a challenge. I I just have to, knowing that something works isn't good enough. I have to know that it works consistently and how it works, and that's just kind of me. But it's coupled with an absolute desire to help pet. There's nothing inspires me more. An animal coming along, or consulting with somebody over the phone, or whatever medium is used to help an animal that can't be helped any other way, or has struggled, because most of the pets we see are kind of, they've reached the point where nothing's helping. They've got cancer, IBD, they've got asthma, they've got chronic musculoskeletal pain, or whatever, but the people are desperate. The animals have reached an end point, and there isn't really much for them going forward, and help. I always believe something can be done in most cases, and when you get the stories coming back, that is what gives me the delight to carry on. I just love it. There isn't anything else I love as much as that. And when we kind of the wonderful thing about what we do is that we created the product from nothing. Just over 3.5-4 years ago, none of these existed. And although I'd used a lot of the different combinations over the last 25 years, it wasn't out there. It was really kind of just in a very limited kind of capacity on a one-to-one basis, or within the clinic that I had in Stockport. But releasing them to the world, and kind of that's been a long, hard process in itself for all sorts of reasons. But getting emails on a daily basis, emails and messages, and people saying, God, I just can't believe the difference in my pet since taking this or doing that. Yeah. And I just love it. And that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. It's inspiring, to think of that pet feeling happy. And more importantly, not more importantly, is the pleasure that gives an owner, because very often that's their best friend, their closest friend. And to be able to positively influence that, what is that's better than that?
Yeah. So I can remember, when I met you at, we had a meeting with Shan from the Chuckling Goat, I think, in London.
Ah, yes, yeah, wow.
And I don't think you had these supplements out then. I don't know that you were doing what you're doing now. So since then, you've really branded like this, the background that you've got here with the colors and the whole Vince the Vet thing. I mean, I can remember the Vince the Vet brand had obviously begun then when I met you, but I've really watched your business become iconic, really, in our field. In our field, I will go. Don't know if it's a household name quite yet, but maybe within the natural dog care field, I'd say you are, or the brand is. So take us through, what were some of the things that you kind of, if imagine if you're somebody, there might be somebody out there that's just making their own aromatherapy oils for dogs, or they might also be bringing out a supplement, but there's only the one supplement. What are some of the things that people can do that will elevate their business?
Well, firstly, I can't take any credit whatsoever for Vince the Vet. I was kind of coming up with all sorts of convoluted names. And Anne, my partner, said, why don't you call it Vince the Vet? You are Vince and you are a vet. Why not? And it was almost like too simple. It's perfect. I mean, it's fate, isn't it? Yeah. So once I kind of got used to the idea, it just took off from there. So you need to have a name that's memorable. And even now, people, when I say Vince the Vet on the phone, there's usually 90% of the time there's a chuckle at the other end of the line, because they think I'm joking, Vince the Vet. They think it's kind of a made up thing, or I'm not. Second thing is, are you really a vet? They think it's just a clever marketing thing. But so it always kind of makes an impact one way or another. And I think that's important, that if you're setting out to do anything, it's important to have something that captures, what you and your purpose is about, and the product too. That's kind of not always as easy as it sounds. I mean, it kind of fell on that, but that's the first thing. Second thing is you've got to have a really clear idea about what it is you want to do, and what it's got to be something that inspires you. There's no point starting if you kind of just want to kind of create a business to make a living. If you're doing that from a kind of self-employed capacity, it's likely that you're going to run out of steam because it is hard work. You are the sole motivator for what you do. You're the sole inspirer of yourself and it can be very kind of demanding and sometimes disheartening if you're trying to do something and your heart isn't 100% in it. So you've got to have something that really gets you here, and those are the two first things I would say.
Okay, so in terms of who did the design work, and did you have an idea of what you wanted them to look like, or did you sort of surrender it all to a good design company, or how did you go about that?
Well, I've got to say, it didn't always look like it does now. The first kind of iteration, if you're version 1, Vince the Vet, the labels were quite cartoony to begin with. We had this kind of idea of making it kind of user-friendly with kind of cartoony characters of dogs and cats doing various things which represented the benefits of the supplements. And looking back, I mean, it's quite amusing from a nostalgic point of view, but it didn't really capture the essence of the supplements themselves. They're highly sophisticated supplements with a lot of clinical proof behind them. I mean, I've seen close on 100,000 pets in the last 35 years. These supplements have developed overuse over the last 25 years in tens of thousands of pets. Most of the work we did originally went into sourcing the highest quality ingredients and making sure they were produced to the highest possible standards. But when it came to putting that in a pot and putting the label on, I mean, that was completely new to us. And kind of we did it ourselves, we were trying, which I think, has its merits to build a business without kind of taking out large loans and this kind of thing. So we wanted it to be self-financing after we put in what we were comfortable putting in to get started. Consequently, we tried to do the design work ourselves, and it kind of looked quite goofy, and I honestly don't know how we sold the supplements the way they looked. It was purely because of the results that pets were getting from taking them that grew what we were doing at that point, because the supplements were just absolutely, and they're kind of world class. But looking back, I would not have probably gone down that stage if I could have done that again. It was kind of, we could have took more design kind of advice at that point. But we got through that. After about 12, we were ready to take the next step. And we got designs in, we got kind of people to look at the range, explained that, it's professional, it was clinically proven, that and the quality was kind of paramount importance, and we wanted that to be reflected on the labels. And so we got some designs in, but to be honest, we're doing all that ourselves too in the end. We got kind of some ideas from the various sources. None of them really captured the essence of what we were doing. And so we actually created the supplement range with the colours and what have you ourselves. And again, in a large part of that was down to Anne. Anne's got a very kind of artistic eye. She was she brought all her teaching experience into it, and I was more interested in kind of the communicating what was in them. So the actual designs themselves, were kind of predominantly, and then it's kind of built on. Once we had the foundation, it's developed from that. The colours are really important. The kind of style of them and the look, everything looks, we think, fairly professional because of the kind of black theme running through it. So yeah, we have found that, we found that it's very difficult to get an external designer who doesn't understand what you're doing and where you're from and what you're about and what your vision is to actually capture that. I think, you can get kind of thoughts and bounce off people, but ultimately, it's down to you to kind of crystallize in a visual form and other forms what you're really trying to kind of communicate. And then when if you can do that, there's no reservations about sharing what you've got to share.
Yeah, I think that's very true actually, because when I consider my logos and the things that I've done in the past, I have really guided the person who did the design. I mean, I needed someone with all the software and kind of understanding how to create the logo, but there's been elements, a lot of guidance. So that's something definitely worth knowing, if you're going to be stepping into this kind of arena.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because you kind of know you haven't got the skills or the graphic design or the use of software and all this kind of stuff, but it's very difficult communicating what you do, and very often you don't know what you want to communicate until you've gone through 50 versions. You start off thinking, yeah, this is it, and that, no, that's not right. And the whole thing evolves. We find this with everything we do, that very often what you end up with is very far from what you started out from. But it's a process, isn't it? You have to create something to be able to improve and evolve and change, But so the process then educates you about what it is you're really trying to communicate and what you really want to share. I'm the sort of person that finds it very difficult to write down, put in kind of words what I'm trying to communicate, because it's very often only when I'm doing it or chatting to you that, I kind of work through what I really think at the same time, and then I find out that by the end of it, I've crystallized what I actually think at this moment in time. So it's a good process to go through, because you really find out what it is in you that you're trying to reach out with to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not being afraid to evolve and grow and change. If you had got stuck on that first labeling that you had, and be like, oh no, we must make this work. We have to make this work. And, rather than letting yourself evolve, then it may not be what it is today.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So also the other thing, I mean, I don't know now when you're doing all this clinicalness, but the going back to the hip hop rap thing, it was very quirky and it was so utterly different. I mean, talk about a brand in USP. What made you come up with something like that?
Well, we kind of we kind of just we wanted to be more approachable and more real. I mean, people often say to us that, well, I'm not like an ordinary vet, because if we do a seminar or do an open day, I'm on the floor rolling around with the pets and getting licked from heads, and kind of I'm very down to earth, and I kind of like that. I like that being different, doing things different, because that's what wakes us up to kind of looking at world through different perspectives, and the rat was just kind of, we came across it on the internet, and there was a guy kind of offering to put kind of, marketing kind of bullet points in a rap form, and we thought, why not, and when he sent it to us, we just thought it was great. It was great fun, and it's another way of kind of capturing kind of a different, not a market, but appealing to a group of people that might not necessarily take notice of you. So kind of younger people into Nicki Minaj and this kind of thing, we kind of think, oh wow, that's a vet, and it's just another way of getting the kind of message out in a fun way.
Yeah. Again, though, I think to have the confidence to do something so different, that's a big key. I think that maybe is, we might actually think, oh no, that's silly, but you did it and it worked, Yeah, it's brilliant. Okay. So moving on to about case studies. Let's talk about case studies, because I know this is one of your favourite things to share about case studies and the value of case studies and testimonials in what we do in terms of building a brand.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the whole purpose of doing what we do is that it produces results. You know, if we were able to create lovely looking tips or remedies, nice labels, but it didn't do anything, or it only helped a small number of pets, I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm basically a clinician, and for me, it's all about getting results and getting results in a high percentage of cases. So I'm, you know, when this journey first started 25 years ago, and we were I was looking for elements from nature that would tap into the healing capabilities of the body, and so it would stimulate and support healing. And I knew there had to be out there. We were looking at kind of what we knew in the homeopathic world. We were looking at what we knew from traditional Chinese medicine and from Ayurvedic herbs and Himalaya combinations, etc., etc. And I started to treat some of the pets in the clinic, you know, naturally. And the results were really disappointing. I was becoming as frustrated using natural kind of remedies and plants and minerals as I was from a conventional point of view. And I realized that most of the texts and most of the information is based on their use in people. And of course, animals aren't people. They're different in their physiology. And they, you know, so we almost had to start from scratch, you know, by kind of using certain plants and adding this and adding that. And so there was a process about developing blends which actually produced the results I was looking for, because you know, it has to be effective for me. So that was the driving force. So it took a lot of work, but gradually we started to get that percentage of pets improving with particular conditions using a certain blend, going up from, you know, 20 to 30 to 40 to 50. And now it's around about kind of 80 to 90% mark in terms of delivering health benefits of some form or another with pets. So that was really kind of quite important. And it's what drives me. So for me, testimonials are so important because A, they show that what you're doing actually works, and B, it's what inspires you to carry on being what you're doing with all the heart, because you know, there's a lot of hard work, as you know, Karen, behind the scenes that, you know, things don't just happen. You know, there are long hours, there's dealing with lots of kind of problems, there's lots of regulatory issues, there's all sorts of kind of stuff, which consumes a lot of time and energy just to be able to kind of do what you really want to do, which is help, you know, kind of pets or whatever you want to do. So you have to have something that's really kind of driving you to do that. So case histories I love because first it shows what I'm doing works. Secondly, it shows what we're doing is changing lives, pets and people, which inspires me. And the third thing it does is it constantly reminds me that the body is incredible, that even now, you know, we're not tapping into a fraction of what the body's capable of doing, you know. And when you read stories, I mean, I've read a lot of books over the years. I mean, some amazing stories where you read, there's one called The Holographic Universe. If you've never read it, Michael Talbot, it is
Love that book.
stunning. Yeah. And you read about, you know, people with terminal cancer waking up the next morning being cancer free and various other things documented. This isn't anecdotal, this is documented. And you think, well, if that is possible, then how can we tap into it? That's the way I think. I don't think, oh, that's a one-off. I think that mechanism, that capability is how do we switch that on? Mm-hmm. The other one is multiple personality disorder, where you've got one personality might be diabetic, and then if the other personality comes in, that diabetes has gone. Now, these, you know, in the conventional medical framework, that can't happen because there's all this cascade of physiological reactions, and then at the root of it is what's causing the diabetes. And yet, with a change of mindset, it is gone. And for me, you know, case histories is important because it kind of encourages you to carry on looking deeper and find out, okay, there is so much more there that we can do if we can tap into those capabilities.
Yeah, phenomenal. In fact, actually, Anita Morajani, is that how you say her name? She's the lady that, I can't remember the name of her book offhand, but if you would, whoever's watching wants to Google Anita Morajani, I think it's Moor, might be Jani. But anyway, she had this cancer recovery where she seemed to just come back and the doctors couldn't believe it. And she talks about this. She talks about this, and potentially did happen on a holographic level. That's quite an old book as well, isn't it? I almost wish there was a new version, to be honest. That holographic book.
Yeah. Yeah, he sadly he died fairly young, Michael Tell, but I'm not sure of the actual circumstances. But I think he was only in his kind of 30s, possibly early 40s, when he passed out. So it's a shame, really, because what else he would have written if he'd had the time? You know, I would love to have found out.
It makes you wonder whether somebody got rid of him.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, it was, who knows? Anyway, yes, what he could have written, phenomenal. In fact, in the interview that I did with Emma Rutherford about how to be a canine nutritionist, we were talking about, or I particularly was talking about nutritional therapy and the power of the body to rebalance itself. So we don't have to always be so fearful of balancing in the bowl, because the body, given the right conditions, can even create some nutrients. So we were discussing that kind of thing as well. And it's so key, I think, to understanding dog and cat health and pet health in general, and our own health, of course, and how the whole planet balances itself, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I know with testimonials, I think you probably don't mind, you know, sort of saying to people, can I use your dog's photo? Can I share this? Sometimes it can feel a little bit like, you know, maybe people don't want their name splashed across social media, or maybe they don't want their dog going viral, or whatever might be happening, you know. So do we kind of have to get permission to be using things like this, or how does that all work?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I can only think of one person in the last 4 years that has actually said, I'd rather not. Nearly everybody else is really just so delighted that their pet has benefited in some way. They want that shared, you know, and they want other pet owners to have the opportunity for their pet change. You know, and most pet owners love that. You know, they love seeing their pet's picture out there, and they love being able to share that testimony. So we don't find a problem at all. And very often have seen a testimonial somewhere else. So they realise that their pet wouldn't be benefiting if the other person hadn't put something online or allowed us to share that for them. One of the key case histories is Donnie, of course, who's just an amazing kind of Labrador. And he came to us probably 6-9 months into the launch of InstaVet 4 years ago, and he had terminal T-cell lymphoma, literally kind of weeks from death. And he had a tangerine-sized lump in one lung, a grapefruit-sized cancer, and had multiples in his liver, multiples in the spleen, and large mesenteric lymph nodes, and also cancer in the lymph nodes in his chest. And he started to go to Liverpool University. We started to see him at the same time. Liverpool University said, look, we can give him chemo, but if he has chemo, the chances are very slim. It was funny, actually, because looking back, the prognosis went from a month to 2 months to 3 months, back to 2 months. Anyway, we started to support him with the supplements and the remedies. This was in March time. By October, he was completely cancer-free. At this point, Liverpool University said, look, T-cell lymphoma, as bad as that, it'll almost revert back within 6 months. Now, we carried on with the protocol. So he's on a protocol of all the supplements. He went on we didn't put him on raw at that point because of all the chemotherapy. So he was on home cooked food, supplemented with oils and supplements. Once he was off, we switched him over onto the raw food. And coming up to November this year, it will be now 4 years since he's completely cancer-free. At one point, he couldn't walk across without gasping for breath. His abdomen was full of fluid, ascites. He couldn't have got much closer to death, without actually keeling over. And yet, here he is later, no cancer whatsoever. So he's in a category of less than 5 of pets that make it that far with that type of cancer. And that is kind of beyond the 6 months, which is really interesting. There's another kind of fact that was that's quite important. He's been through spinal surgery since and bounced back because he had a partially prolapsed intervertebral disc. So he's kind of had all the hydrotherapy and what have you, which has gone on, alongside. But again, he's had holistic with that. And he kind of is just a constant reminder of the value of what we do. And, it's just such an amazing story. And you think, what a kind of amazing turnaround. And his faces, there's a great debate about chemo. You mustn't, if your dog's got cancer, whatever you do, don't kind of go down the chemo route. Well, in case, you've got to be pragmatic. I actually think the chemo bought Donnie time. I don't think he would have been alive long enough for the support that was given to have had an impact. So I actually think that having the chemo, which shrunk rapidly, gave us the time to do what we could do to support him holistic. And then once the chemo had finished, what we did took over. And really now, it's an incredible story. So that for me is kind of inspiring. And we've seen an awful lot of pets come as a result of Donnie and Dory. And that's why it's so important, really, to ask people, can we share, and most people, as I say, are delighted with that.
Yeah. Oh, what a wonderful dog, bless him. I do remember seeing his picture, I think, when you spoke at the Imperfectly Natural Canine book launch. I'm pretty sure you showed his picture. Yeah. And I think that's it, is having the confidence to kind of ask people and keep asking, because, they might forget. Or in fact, there's somebody who I recently, she asked me some information about her dog and its behaviour, and I kind of answered with a few bits and pieces which I just thought off the top of my head and or felt really, and sent to her, and she said that something had shifted. Like normally I would have an actual consultation with someone and the dog's behaviour would shift, but she said, something shifted, and the fact that you understood my dog kind of shifted something in me, and now the behaviour's just gone. And I thought, oh, okay, didn't even get to do a consultation with that one. I'll have a photo, and of course the lady hasn't sent it to me yet, and I have asked her a couple of times. So it could be easy for me to say, she doesn't really want to send it, but she's probably just busy. So it's like having the confidence, I think, to just sort of go back and say, do you mind? I think is key with this kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really important point, actually, Caroline, that you have to ask people. We all live such busy lives, and people can have the best of intentions and be absolutely delighted, but there's so many demands for our attention and time. So you have to keep asking, and so don't be put off by the fact that you've asked somebody and they've said they'll give you a testimonial, but haven't got round to it. Just keep asking. And very often it's not because people don't want to do it. It's just simply because we live in such busy lives, But that's a really interesting story, actually. I had a similar experience when I still had the practice in Stockport, and somebody brought a German Shepherd along for homeopathic treatment at the time. And I didn't actually prescribe anything during the consultation or afterwards, because I like to analyse the case and then be absolutely sure that what I'm giving is what I have faith in. And they rang up a few days later and said all the symptoms that the dog had come for, it was a bowel problem, had disappeared. And that was kind of a really clear illustration of the power of creating a healing space, having the intention to help, and that there was no kind of conscious design around that at all, you know. And I thought that is fascinating. And that was a sustained healing response. I didn't need to send anything out. So you're right. Very often, I mean, healing takes place at so many other levels, doesn't it? And sometimes just creating the right environment can be enough to unlock that personal pet's kind of own healing mechanisms.
Yeah, just as the holographic universe would say, of course. Yeah. So I know that some of the things you've done, I could just think of in terms of branding, but I wonder if you could sort of tell me which of them do you find actually kind of gave you the biggest leap? Because I know you've done a radio show or podcasty type thing. I know you've done talks and events. You know, taking your supplements to actually sell them at kind of events. But I'm thinking, I don't know if you've been to like pet fairs.
Book launch.
Have you done like the London Pet Show and crafts and that kind of thing? And the other thing I know you've done is you've done kind of like pop-up clinics in different parts of the country.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you think really were worth doing, and maybe some that maybe didn't bring as much back as you hoped it would?
We haven't done a lot of shows. We're going to do a lot more going forward, but we haven't done a lot of the conventional kind of pet shows, really. We still get people contacting us who were present at your book launch, who listened to the talk and then came to speak to us afterwards. And that really has been very kind of positive and long lasting. That kind of thing, I think, is really important to get out and if you can give a talk, which, you know, can be a bit daunting, but if you can give a talk, people love to listen to something, you know, from the heart, and you've got something to illustrate that. And then also, you know, have a stand at these kind of occasions where people, you know, have the opportunity to speak to you, you know. So I think those kind of things really the best way to get started. Giving talks, having stands, you know, not necessarily at Crofts or places like that, which, you know, are very busy, very expensive, but, you know, local shows and smaller occasions and book launches can be a great way of starting to get out there. Advertising by and large, I wouldn't advise. We don't do a lot of it. You can spend a lot of money putting adverts in the pet publications and this kind of thing. And I know from before we started to do this that kind of money really very often doesn't give you a kind of good return. It's okay if you're already an established brand. You're doing this as part of maintaining your brand in the kind of public awareness, and it's almost a given that you keep having to do that, to be out there if you're a biggish company. But when you're starting off and resources are kind of tight and you have to make sure that you're spending wisely and getting the most impact for it, then that's not the best way to go. One proviso is if you've got a great story, Facebook can be brilliant for that, you know, and Facebook ads we find are fantastic in that regard. So that is something well worth doing. Yeah, get those for me would be, you know, if I was starting over again and I just had to pick 2 or 3 things, I would often give talks. I would have stands, as many local kind of events, and we did a lot of local events, you know, breed shows and launch and various other things on that scale where you actually get to chat and meet people, and you're kind of just an anonymous person, you know, person with another pet product in a huge kind of hall, you know, where opportunities for people really getting to know you and what you're about are quite limited.
Yeah, I think there's a running theme through this whole Pawtential Summit about showing up, like really showing up and meeting people, connecting, and online, but also in person is becoming increasingly more of value, I think, as we've kind of gone down that route of it's all e-meeting and I was going to say e-meeting again, but I meant like Skype, you know, and then we've done like live videos, but then when they actually get to properly meet you, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And what you said about the Facebook ads is interesting, because one of the things I've been learning is that if you can write a story, like we think of Facebook sometimes as just quick things that people are just flicking through their feed, but actually when people come across a story, say like Donnie's story, they will read this and it's like, whoa, and that actually then captures so much better as a Facebook ad than just a short little thing. So say like a dog trainer wants to get more people to come to their new class, then perhaps they talk about a dog that has already graduated from the previous dog school, and how much fun that dog had or something. I think that's a really cool way to use Facebook ads, I think.
And something which I didn't mention earlier is it's really helpful to have some kind of mentoring process as well. Before we kind of set Vince the Vet up, even though I've been self-employed since 3 years out of university, and I had the practice, and then we set up a healing clinic in near Winchester for a number of years, or what have you. And I've always been self-employed. Deciding to try and get out there in a different way rather than just on a one-to-one basis. I kind of knew would involve a whole different set of skills. So, I was lucky. It's not running now, unfortunately, but Prime, run by the Princess Trust, used to have a kind of a mentoring scheme where you'd go along and there was a series of courses, and it was all about putting a business plan together and about kind of skills and this, that, and the other. So I'm sure that there's a lot of similar things out there now which can fulfill the same process. But it's really important to do that, because, again, it helps crystallize the practicalities from a business point of view of how to put into reality the vision that you have, because all these necessarily have practical steps, and each of those has financial consequences, and also there's a time element involved too. So that is something really that's essential if you kind of really want to go beyond do a business on a fairly small kind of local scale.
I think that's very true, actually. I always shunned away from people that sort of tried to sell me mentorship and things. And then last year, 2018, I took on a mentorship with a lady that had been on Dragon's Den, Rachel Elnath, I think is how you say her name. Should know that, of course. But anyway, she was great. And it was about really bringing a business of service. So what can you be of, how can your business be as much of service to people? So you almost you forget the financial side in a sense, and you go on, what can I offer? What can I be of service? And the other side of it seems to work itself out somehow. It's really interesting. And actually Rachel's coming to we're doing a Pawtential networking day on June the 2nd in Buxton in Derbyshire, and Rachel is coming to talk at that. So we have an ex-Dragon's Den expert coming to the working day. So I'm sure she can talk about mentorship then, because that year really did solidify where I was going in my business last year. And this year I've taken on a mentor as well, but she's much more about, she's more, I'd say, in the logical masculine side, pushing through all the things I didn't do so much of last year. So I'm now integrating the two. So it's more strategy this year. And so far I'm enjoying it. Although apart from, this isn't part of it. This is just like an idea I had. I'm a bit like you, where I just have these ideas. So I'm going to do that. That would be really fun, and it's free, so I'm making like zero profit from it, but I'm really enjoying it. Sometimes that's what matters.
I mean, you touched on another point there about kind of sharing. I kind of I'm just going to choose my words. I was rubbish at selling. I hate selling. I'm not a salesman, and I hate the idea that I might be selling something to somebody. It's just horrible. I'm not. It's not in my makeup, and most British people are the same, actually. If you kind of, unless you're a kind of certain personality and you love the salesman type who get a real thrill out of it, which is a small minority, the rest of us don't. But if you're really passionate about what you're doing and you see the results, I always say to kind of people taking on our products, the retailers, what have you, it's focus on sharing, not selling. You're not selling. If you use the products yourself and you see the difference they make, you're sharing, and sharing is easy because there is no reservation, there is no doubt, because you've got total belief. You've seen the results and you hear the feedback coming back, and we all love sharing something, particularly when it comes to making a pet's life better in some way. Why wouldn't you? I'd find, and just that kind of flip around, you actually find it more difficult not to share than to share, whereas selling is the other way around. So that is kind of something that we focus on, and we kind of say to other people, look, this is sharing, not selling, and all that angst can go.
Yes, I know. I like that. It's like, forget marketing. You're just telling people. You just got to find a way to tell people that resonate with you, I guess. Yeah. So what about that radio show you did? Did that really come to anything, or was that worth doing?
It did. I mean, we did. I think it was about 40 or 50 shows, but
wow,
I had to drop. Yeah, I used to go out every weekend.
Sorry.
Wow. Well, yeah, I used to go out. They wanted us to do it weekly. We did it kind of fortnightly, but it was just too time consuming, actually. So I had to kind of let it go because it's just not enough hours in the day. That was the only reason, but it was great from that point of view. But what we are going to be doing, we're actually starting with retailers next week, is we're going to be doing kind of live webinars on various subjects, which we will record, and then they'll become available. So retailers will have access to webinars on each of the kind of products in the range, but we're also going to be doing webinars for pet owners as well, which will make it kind of a lot easier to get out to people what we're doing, and more importantly, how they can best help their pets, in a kind of effective way. And so that's kind of taking the place of all that.
When you say webinars for retail, do you mean like to explain how they would stock and trade your products?
How to get the most out of each of the products in the range. So they're given the confidence on, first of all, understand the products, the benefits they kind of provide, and how they can be used to maximum effect, because happy pets, happy customers, business grows.
Yes, now that's interesting because some of you may have seen on the other Pawtentials, I've taken on a role as the nutrition consultant for a bone broth, organic bone broth company. And because I am here in Cyprus, and I decided as well that even if I did go back to England, last thing I wanted was one of this company car stuck on the M6 halfway to see people that are stocking your product. I actually wondered about doing trade webinars as well to market Gravio and explain Gravio and just give people an idea of what it was, and then they would know whether they wanted to have that in their store or not. They would know that from watching the webinar, rather than using the old approach, which was hop in the car, go and see the customer. Like maybe down the line that might be more relevant. But I think this is it's another thing about showing up and sort of showing your products to different people, I guess, online. But I think it's a really, really good thing to do. Oh, better for the planet as well, of course.
Yeah, and it's important, isn't it, that you kind of explore lots of different ways, because communication now is so much more widespread, isn't it? And so much more diverse, and people kind of, communicate in ways really going back 10 or 15 years I just wasn't familiar with. I mean, every day, so we get emails, we get messages via Messenger, we get people kind of commenting on Facebook, we get people emailing, contacting us through the web form on the website. We can get people leaving voicemail on the phone. And no one kind of medium works. You have to be willing to kind of open up as many different avenues of communication as possible. If if you're going to kind of promote yourself and share with what you've got, and this is not going to kind of change. If anything, we kind of use Facebook a lot, we use Twitter, we use all these other mediums, but I'm not on Instagram, and half of the things that the youngsters talk about, don't know anything about, but you've got to be out in as many of the kind of as possible.
Yeah, I think so. It's worth doing something like that. You wouldn't necessarily have always thought of before. Yeah. Well, I think we've had a wonderful chat, and we've given a information. It's absolutely fascinating, your journey, and what you've managed to create is inspirational. Of course, this is why I asked you to do it, really. But I'm really grateful that you could come on and share what you have shared, and take the time to do it as well out of your schedule.
An absolute pleasure.
That's okay, cool. So do you want to, I'm guessing it's a bit obvious your website is vincethevet.com. I'm guessing.
It is .co.uk.
Oh, .co.uk. Okay.
Yeah.
It's got .com. There can't be a vincethevet.com.
I think we've got it. We don't use it. I think we own it, but we don't use it. I'd have to check.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I really enjoyed that. I hope it's useful.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. It's getting dark. It's getting dark where I am. Of course, I can't go off and turn the lights off because I have to excuse myself from the recording. Okay, right. Well, thank you everyone for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode of Pawtential, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye for now.